Then I'll share some updates on the IRA program since we last met in December. Then we'll hear from Joshua Galloway, who many of you know from New Ecology. He led our technical assistance portion of the boot camp, and he'll walk through some steps that you all can start taking now to prepare your properties to access IRA funds. And then we'll hear from Isaac Baker, the co-CEO of Resonant Energy in Massachusetts, who will share some insights on their experience supporting developers applying for the ITC, or the Low Income Community Bonus Tax Credit. Lessons learned, some examples, and best practices for developers who are hoping to apply this year. We should have plenty of time at the end of the session for questions, but as always, feel free to put them in the chat as we move through the slides. So most of you should already be receiving our IRA newsletter, but if you don't, or if there's others in your organization that you think would like to be added to our mailing list, we've included a link for you all to sign up. I just sent it in the chat, but when we share the slides at the end of this week, you can access it that way. We tend to put out a newsletter once a month with latest information IRA program. Later this month, we will also be launching our first Insights on Housing webinar series, which is a series of conversations with leading experts on current and critical issues in housing. So our first webinar is focused on protecting renters and maintaining their housing stability while increasing revenue to preserve affordable housing. We have some panelists who will be joining our webinar, including our CEO, Priya Jayachandran, Bridget Simmons from the National Housing Law Project, Vincent Reyna from the University of Pennsylvania, and Deidre Schmidt from Common Bond Communities. And if you're interested, I will pop a link now in the chat to register for this session, but you can also access it when the slides are shared later. So diving into the IRA, since December, there have been some significant updates to the various IRA programs. HUD is approaching the final rounds of their GRP, or Green and Resilient Retrofit Program cohort deadlines. States have also been submitting applications to DOE for the home energy rebate. And last month and in March, EPA announced the awards for all three of their Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund competitions. So we'll dive into all of that information in more detail. The first is HUD's Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, or GRP. So HUD has extended the deadlines for all three of the program cohorts, which you can see in orange in the last column. So to be eligible for GRP, you have to be a HUD subsidized property. The list of eligible properties include PBRA properties, Section 202, 811, and 236. But the program is focused on reducing properties' climate impact while making units more efficient, safe, and healthy for residents through the three cohorts of funding. So the first is elements. You can receive up to $40,000 per unit to substitute better building components like appliances and equipment during a planned recapitalization. The second is leading edge, which provides up to $60,000 per unit to help developers achieve an advanced green building certification during a whole building retrofit. And the third is comprehensive, which is up to $80,000 in funding for comprehensive whole building retrofits that include TA from HUD. They've announced 2 awards so far. The third should be announced soon, with the final round of applications being accepted in the next few months. HUD also announced their energy and water benchmarking initiative last year. We highlighted this on a previous session, but just wanted to bring it back to everyone's attention. So to be eligible for this program, you have to be an eligible GRP property, but you don't have to be an awardee of GRP to participate in the program. But the initiative provides help with collecting energy and water usage data from utility companies, information on a property's energy and water performance and how they compare to similar properties, recommendations for savings, benchmarking analytics from Energy Star portfolio manager, as well as technical assistance and other resources. If you're interested in participating in the initiative, you can email the email for HUD at the bottom of the slide, and HUD staff can help you enroll. The second program we would like to talk about today is EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or GGRF, which included $27 billion in funding to mobilize financing and private capital to address the climate crisis, ensure the country's economic competitiveness, and promote energy independence, while also delivering low energy costs and economic revitalization to communities that have historically been left behind. So there are 3 competitions under GRF. GGRF first is National Clean Investment Fund, or NCIF, which was designed to fund national nonprofit financing entities to create national clean financing institutions to deliver accessible and affordable financing while also leveraging private capital. The second is the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. This was designed to fund hub nonprofits to provide financing, funding, and technical assistance to community lenders to help finance clean technology projects in low-income and disadvantaged communities. And the third is Solar for All, which was designed to expand existing or create new solar programs that benefit low-income communities. EPA has outlined the priority projects for GGRF. This includes distributed energy generation and storage projects, so small-scale solar projects like rooftop solar, community solar, and microgrids. Net zero emission buildings, which includes retrofitting existing buildings to achieve net zero and constructing new net zero buildings. The emphasis here is on housing, but the priority project is not exclusive to residential buildings. And the last is zero emission transportation. So since we last met, EPA has announced the awards for all three programs. I'll give a quick overview of the awards, but on the bottom of each slide, there's a link to EPA's homepage that gives you much more detailed descriptions of the awardees and their programs and applications. So for NCIF, which is the $14 billion competition, partners Calvert Impact, Self-Help, and Community Preservation Corporation partnered together and were awarded just under $7 billion to work with first mortgage lenders to offer low-cost, high-leverage debt products that include requirements for owners to decarbonize their buildings. Coalition for Green Capital received $5 billion to leverage the national network of green banks to further invest into communities. And a coalition including Enterprise Community Partners, Rewiring America, Habitat for Humanity, LISC, and United Way received $2 billion to provide support to single-family and multifamily owners and developers with customizable and affordable capital solutions. And at least 50% of funding will be invested in low-income communities across these programs. For the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, EPA made 5 awards under the CCIA competition. The Opportunity Finance Network received $2.29 billion to provide capital and TA to CDFIs. Inclusive received $1.87 billion to provide credit unions with capitalization funding and TA. Just Climate Fund received $940 million to create and support community-based green lender certification programs. The Appalachian Community Capital received $500 million to launch a green bank for rural America. And the Native CDFI Network received $400 million to provide capital and TA to 63 lenders to support projects in Native communities across the country. EPA is currently working with NCIF and CCIA awardees to finalize their agreement terms, and those should be announced in the next couple months. EPA also made 60 awards last month under the Solar for All competition. 49 awards were made to state level programs, which include nonprofits and state agencies like your state energy office. 5 were made to multi-state nonprofits, which will cover anywhere from 7 to 44 states. And 6 awards were made to tribes. So this map shows how your state will be receiving Solar for All funding, whether it's through a state level program, a multi-state program, or both. Quick summary of what this means in terms of how solar will be accessible across the country. So 90% of applicants plan to fund residential rooftop solar, which includes single family and multifamily properties. 88% plan to fund the deployment of community solar with diverse ownership models. 78% plan to fund storage solutions to increase community resiliency. Of the 5 multi-state nonprofits that were selected, one was Grid Alternatives, whom NHT is a project partner with. I'm going to let Todd share a little bit more about that application and proposal.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Madeline. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so one of the 5 multi-state awardees, as Madeline mentioned, is an initiative led by Grid Alternatives, which is a very large nonprofit, community-based solar developer. And there are about 10 organizations as a part of this coalition that's going to implement the Solar Access for Nationwide Affordable Housing Program. So the award was for $249 million to provide financial assistance and technical assistance to support solar storage and enabling upgrades in affordable single and multifamily housing. We will be prioritizing about 29 states that you see here. And there is going to be a heavy emphasis on serving multifamily buildings. We estimate that the initiative will serve 37,000 households, 6,000 single family, 25,000 multifamily, and 6,000 through community solar. All of that is subject to change because we're still in the process of negotiating the final work plan with EPA. But we're really happy to receive the award. You know, one of the benefits we think to a multi-state program when it comes to multifamily is that if you are a building owner with a portfolio that spans multiple states, it's probably a lot easier to work through a single program to access solar incentives. So we will be keeping you all informed as we finalize the program design, and we'll certainly share information with you all once the program launches. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd. So you're probably wondering where you can learn more about your state's Solar for All program and your state's award. So we've developed a state funding tracker to track each state's Solar for All program. The tracker is updated weekly and it provides information on who in your state is administering Solar for All, what multi-state program may be supporting your state, expected program launch dates, and specific details on your state's multifamily and community solar programs. EPA is working with awardees to finalize agreement terms, which should be done this summer, but no later than the end of September. But as more states release information on their program design and programs are finalized, this tool will have up-to-date information on your state. And it's accessible through our IRA toolkit, which is linked on the bottom of the slide. And I'll note that because we are updating this weekly, if there's information that you would like us to start including in for your states, you can always email me and we can pull information where it's available. So since announcing the awards, EPA has announced the impact of Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and what this will have on the country. So just to get an idea of how impactful this program is. All 50 states plus DC, Puerto Rico, and US territories will be covered by at least one Solar for All program. 100% of the Solar for All funding and 70% of NCIS and CCIA funding will go to low income and disadvantaged communities. There will also be significant CO2 emission reductions from all three programs, helping to reach the Biden administration's emission reduction and clean electricity grid goals. With Solar for All, we expect 900,000 households will benefit from this program, and households can expect to see about $400 in annual electricity bill savings. And across the program, all three programs will deliver and create hundreds of thousands of good paying green jobs across the country. I won't spend too much time talking about the ITC since Isaac will be talking about this more in depth in a little bit. But Treasury has announced the 2024 program year ITC allocations. There's no major changes from last year other than 100 megawatts has been reallocated from category 1, which is low income communities, to category 4, which is the low income economic benefit projects. But category 3 has the same allocations they did last year, which is probably the category that's most applicable to folks in the call today. And then the final program I'll talk about is the Department of Energy Home Energy Rebate. So there's two types of rebates. The first is the home efficiency rebate for HER. This is to improve the energy efficiency of an existing building. So if you achieve 20 to 34% energy savings, you can get up to $4,000 per unit in rebate. If you achieve over 35% energy savings, you can get up to $8,000 per unit, but you can't exceed 80% of project costs. And then the second one is the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program, or HERE. This is an appliance-based rebate program for both new construction and retrofit projects. So eligible rebates are for heat pump water heaters, heat pumps for space heating and cooling, electric stoves, cooktops, ranges, and ovens, electric heat pump dryers, electric wiring, and building envelope improvements such as insulation, air sealing, and ventilation. You can receive up to 100% of project costs, but you can't exceed $14,000 per unit. And these amounts are based on single family homes with a household income below 80% AMI and multifamily buildings with at least 50% of the households at incomes 80% AMI. So DOE rebates are administered by state energy offices. They are the only agency eligible to apply and receive rebate funding. This map gives an overview of where states are in the process of applying for and receiving their rebates. So far, only New York has submitted an application. They submitted for their home electrification and appliance rebate program. But Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Hawaii, Minnesota, Indiana, Georgia, and New Hampshire have also submitted their rebate programs. Most of them have just submitted for home electrification and appliance, but some have also submitted the home efficiency rebate applications. But states do have until the end of January next year to get their applications in. We expect most states to be applying at some point this year, though. Similar to the Solar for All tracker, we've developed one for rebate programs as well. So in this tool, you can see your state rebate application status, so whether or not your state energy office is preparing your application, if they've applied to DOE, or if DOE has approved their application. We're also detailing state program designs and requirements for multifamily housing. So income requirements, eligible property types, income verification processes, all those details. And this again will be updated weekly as states release information. And since we are updating it regularly, if there's information that you think would be helpful to include, that's not included, feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so I've been speaking for a while. Now I'm going to pass it over to Joshua from New Ecology, who is going to talk about steps you all can start taking now to prepare your properties for IRA funding once it hits your state.
Thank you, Madeline. Hello, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces, and we're very excited to continue this conversation. We have this conversation with many groups, and everyone is very excited, and then very quickly has a lot of questions for how to take the next steps. And I think that the work that we've done together so far is helpful because we've identified some big ideas that need to be addressed at each property. And so the most important thing is to identify what are the measures that need attention at each property, whether it's air sealing and insulation or indoor quality air issues with ventilation, whatever it may be, that some of the main pieces are identified in that preliminary scope of work that we put together with you all. One of the main next steps is to do an energy audit. And the idea with an energy audit is that you get to look at utility use and cost, the needs of the property, and estimated costs and savings. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. The preliminary scope of work that we put together with you all was a desk assessment. So not going out to the property, but just reviewing files virtually. And so next step would be to actually get folks out into the field to do an energy audit on the building and put some costs and savings to the measures. If there's not an opportunity to do an energy audit, another first step is to benchmark the property in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And that means you collect utility data from your common area meters, residential or apartment meters, or you can do aggregate utility data for the entire property and then add that information to Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and it can give you a starting point. The reasons it's important to do an energy audit and benchmark your property is that when Inflation Reduction Act funds become available, applications are going to ask, how much energy are you going to save and what are you going to do? And so that's why the energy audit is really one of the best strategies to do. In the final reports that we sent out. The last page or the second to last page of the recommendations for each property included an audit guide. And so I'd encourage you to refer to that audit guide, and I'll send it as well to Madeline so she can send it out with the slides. And it just goes through looking at different audit types. And so there can be an energy and water efficiency audit if that's your focus, or if you know you want to electrify over time, a zero over time audit, which looks at energy efficiency, but also how to implement electrification or decarbonization over a period of time. And the reason that might be helpful is if you have a new boiler in your building, you don't want to get rid of it and put in heat pumps to electrify your property because you have just paid for that boiler. And so the zero over time audit looks at the existing conditions and then gives you a 5, 10, 15-year plan for electrification and decarbonization. The audit, an ASHRAE Level 2 audit, is also done in a language that funders understand. And so an ASHRAE Level 2 audit is something that housing finance agencies and CDFIs understand the metrics that are used to put together that information. And so that's one of the reasons why an audit is a good next step. Want to just add a couple things onto what Madeline and Todd mentioned on the funding. New Ecology was part of teams for both the National Clean Investment Fund, the NCIF, and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, the CCIA, and are currently working with partners to identify ways to basically get the funding opportunities out into the field. And so we don't know how it's going to work yet, but we will all obviously keep Madeline informed of the process and then how we can move forward. The idea is that the IRA Bootcamp is really the beginning, and we want to keep involved in supporting all the teams through identifying additional funding, implementation, and then operations. And the greenhouse gas reduction funds, the GGRF, are going to be a great tool to use for implementation. And so that part of the process is really important. The other piece to talk about is some of the funding plays well with others and some doesn't. And so some of the tax credits, like the 179D tax credit, does not play well with a low-income housing tax credit award. 45L tax credit and low-income housing tax credits and a HUD GRRP funding, they all play well together, and you can use them all on a single property. And so that's something else to keep in mind, is that after you have your energy audit and you're looking at potential funding sources, what programs play well together? And that obviously has to include your finance folks, your attorneys, to understand how the requirements for each funding source relate to the work you're trying to do, and whether you can use them together or not. This all goes to say that everything is, there are many layers of both the work and the funding. And so this opportunity with NHT to work on this bootcamp is ideal because we have a central place to go for information with the resources that Madeline shared. Thank you, Madeline.
Awesome. Thanks, Joshua. Like I said earlier, we'll have some time for questions at the end, but I'm going to quickly pull my slides back up and introduce Isaac Baker, who is the co-CEO of Resonant Energy. He will be talking through some of his experiences helping developers apply for the ITC. Isaac, I'm going to quickly bring up your slides if you want to just introduce yourself.
Great. Nice to be on the call with you all. As noted, my name's Isaac. I'm co-founder of Resonant Energy. We are a employee-owned B Corp certified solar development company based in Boston, serving clients in New England and New York. And a lot of our affordable housing work began 4 years ago with a technical assistance program called our STAR program that we launched with LISC Massachusetts and with MACDC in the Massachusetts market, which has helped us build some momentum in the lead up to this ultimate rollout of this program around solar adoption for affordable housing. So I'm going to talk about today is mostly to dive into our experience with the first year of the low-income bonus tax credit regime, and some quick thoughts as to how that's going to thread in with a lot of the other new funding sources that Madeline covered that are all about to come online later this year and into early next year. We can hop to the next slide here. So this is just a quick background on us, but Do Solar and Storage were founded in 2016. All of our work is for nonprofits and affordable housing in our kind of New England and New York markets, with a primary focus on projects in Massachusetts and New York, generally speaking. And I'd say a number of things that we've developed, but just in terms of by about 60 to 70% of our organization's work is affordable housing. So a lot of what we are figuring out is not just how do we apply for these tax credit adders and help try and be noting, as has been talked about with GRRP and all these other funding sources, developers and building owners have your hands full thinking about the whole picture of energy efficiency and electrification and a lot of other moving parts and pieces. Our goal is to try and be able to plug in solar and to be able to do basically everything for our clients to try and help lighten the load of this massive change that has to happen. So everything from lender and investor consents, which is one of the big lifts of making anything happen at these properties, which we've specialized in, tax credit adders, supporting elective pay for many of our nonprofit housing owners, where you can get your tax credits paid directly out as a check now, are all things that we've been working to build out to try and make this whole process easier as we go. Go to the next slide. This is just a quick summary of our STAR program with LISC Boston, now known as LISC Massachusetts as of last week, and MACDC. We've been analyzing roughly 15 housing developers in the Massachusetts market, doing statewide portfolio assessments of all the buildings that they have for solar feasibility, assessing all of the financing pathways for how they can do solar, and then helping them take next steps. And we've got many folks that we're already working with are present on the call here today, but some examples are the Community Builders, Planning Office of Urban Affairs, Hebrew Senior Life, and many others. Over 44 developers we've done these assessments for, and we have hundreds of buildings that are now taking action with solar in the last few years based on this. We also just did a citywide assessment of the Boston Housing Authority with some dedicated philanthropic dollars this past year. That is, and we have another round coming soon. So we can move on from there. So as you're probably familiar, there are 4 categories of bonus tax credit for solar. We've drilled down on just 2 of them. So just as a quick reminder, there's category 1, which we call the low income location one, which is basically just using the new market tax credit map is category 1. Category 2 is for tribal land, of which there's relatively limited exposure in Massachusetts and a lot of the New England states. So we have not submitted any of those yet, but that is available. Category 3 is for affordable multifamily, and that has a federal designation. So most commonly that's LIHTC and project-based Section 8, but that'll also be your HUD 202s and everything else. So those are, and then category 4 is low income community solar, which is way oversubscribed and a whole other thing that you don't need to worry about. So for most affordable housing, category 1 and category 3 are the 2 main pathways. And it's important to note that you have to choose for any given project. And I would say probably 80% plus of our affordable housing projects we're working on are actually eligible for both of these, because it's project-based Section 8. It's also in a new market tax credit eligible zip code. You occasionally see developers, right, who do in Massachusetts use our zoning policy to get a project into a fairly affluent suburban community, which, as you all as developers know, is rife with legal pushback and all the fun stuff. So occasionally you'll see those projects in more affluent communities are not eligible for category 1, but are eligible for category 3. Most projects that we see are eligible for both. So then you have to choose. In general, most folks are choosing category 3, the 20% adder, as they come to know more about it. But we had many clients In the first round this past year, since it was also new when they were eligible for both, many of them chose the low-income location because it did not require any ongoing work. And that was deemed to be helpful from a compliance standpoint because you've got enough compliance going on with these properties already. So for low income location, you're just, if the building is in an eligible census tract, it's eligible. And then for category 3, you are mostly your LIHTC or your project-based Section 8, and you then are required to distribute some of the value from the solar for the first 5 years after the system is turned on. And that is now creating that annual compliance hurdle that some clients were concerned about. We think is a fairly nominal issue that shouldn't be a problem, but that's the background. And then just to note, you get one of these awards are available for a given site. There's 1.8 gigawatts allocated nationally. You can think about this like a competitive procurement for LIHTC or for anything else. There's a dashboard that shows all the national way things work. There's a lottery if if there's more volume of applications than is received in a given year. And once you get an award, you can install up to 4 years after reserving. So that's especially relevant for a lot of our new construction clients who are doing affordable housing. The benefit to that is if you sign a contract early in your new construction development cycle, you can apply multiple times. So you could apply in the 2024 calendar year. And if your building's not being built till 26, you could apply in 24, you could apply in 25, and you might even be able to apply in 26, depending on the timing of when your building is built and when you want your solar installed and turned on. So that is one of the benefits for new construction is, getting these processes started very early gives you the best chance at getting one of these awards. And then worth noting that there is what are called additional selection criteria. So public entities and nonprofits were moved to the front of the line. So if you have a nonprofit or public entity owned solar project, and that is unfortunately does not apply to a nonprofit that has a LLC LIHTC partnership vehicle, that if the partnership vehicle is going to own the solar, it is not eligible for this additional selection criteria because you have a for-profit entity by the definition. So this would be more relevant if you have an affordable housing project where you have some post-LIHTC projects that you own outright on balance sheet as a nonprofit. You can get to the front of the line. Many housing authorities own projects outright and they can get to the front of the line. So those would be the types of additional selection criteria pathways. Can hop to the next slide. Another thing to note, so that's how you get either to 40 or 50% with a competitive application. And then again, I know we have folks on this call from more than just Massachusetts, but that's where we have the deepest level of expertise. But you can kind of infer that some of these changes are relevant nationwide in other states as well. So in Massachusetts, there's also, or I should say on a nationwide basis, you have the Energy Community Adder, which we at our office refer to as the Joe Manchin Adder. As we all perhaps remember from 2022, Manchin was the final vote that got this over the line, and that gave him a lot of leverage to put whatever he wanted in the bill. And this was one of the things that he wanted. So he wrote this Energy Communities Adder, which is 10%. It's non-competitive, and it is eligible in areas for places that are brownfield sites. So if you have affordable housing projects being done on brownfield sites, that can make them eligible for this adder, though it has to be more than just petroleum as the form of toxic contamination that is determining the brownfield site. So there's some fine print there, but brownfield site, if you have census tracts near former coal-fired power plants, so you can see here in Massachusetts, that is the Beverly, Salem, Fall River, and Holyoke areas on this map, these little orange dots. And then you have census tracts with high rate of employment in energy sector and high rates of unemployment overall, which is the sort of the Joe Manchin criteria here, because that last category basically means all of West Virginia became an energy community census tract. And then interestingly, about half of Massachusetts just a month ago got designated as an energy community, with the 6 counties listed below So you have a lot of Western Mass with Franklin County, Worcester County, and Berkshire County, and then all of the Cape and Islands got tagged in March for this energy community designation. It's honestly not even clear to me how and why it got tagged, because we don't have a lot of fossil fuel employment, but I'm assuming it's because we have enough people working in our natural gas distribution sector that allowed it to qualify. And then these areas do have relatively higher rates of unemployment, and so that allowed them to meet the threshold. So that's stackable, which is worth noting here. You can get either the 10 or 20% competitive allocation on top of your 30% baseline, plus this. So this is now bringing you up into the 30 to 60% range between these different adders for the whole turnkey cost of a solar installation. And I'll just flag, I've listed the counties that were eligible for Massachusetts, but there are many other counties across every other state in the nation that got tagged this last March. So it's worth looking into if there were any changes that might be applicable where you are. Keep moving. This was already referenced, but this is just to kind of drill down at the state level for Massachusetts and for some of the core states we work in. So Massachusetts got $156 million. Out of that 156, it tagged 25 million for public housing and 40 million for private affordable housing. I should say that Massachusetts it applied for 250 million and it only got 156. So that 25 and 40, those numbers are going to shrink a little bit. But between now and the end of the year, the Solar for All, this is going to be basically grant money as we understand it, that's going to help subsidize projects. So if you're getting 40 to 60% off on a tax credit basis, there's a good chance that these Solar for All funding at these with these state level programs could fund up to the entirety of the rest of the project cost, with a whole lot of fine print, which is our main understanding, having done a bunch of consulting and analysis with the state around this, is that you have to have a certain amount of savings that you can distribute per household, which is the EPA's kind of main hurdle to get over. And so what that's going to do is it's going to mean that projects, basically really tall buildings that don't have much in the way of space for solar, but have a lot of units, are not going to work well for this funding source. Whereas low-rise or mid-rise buildings or townhouses are going to work really well for this because you're going to have a better ratio of solar and therefore savings produced by the solar array to the underlying unit count in the building. So your dollars per unit per year is going to work better when you have more roof space relative to your unit count in the building. So that's our high level, which is to say, potentially some free money coming this fall or winter in almost every state, as Madeline's map showed, with a whole lot of fine print on how that's all going to work, and then potentially low-cost loans and other things via GGRF as other pathways. So what we're doing right now is encouraging all of our developers to basically get projects shovel ready and in the queue. And there's going to be a huge bonanza of once everybody gets their legal agreements in place at the federal level, with everybody starting to try and move money out the door into shovel-ready projects starting in Q3 or Q4 of this year is our anticipation. And so that is what we are helping all of our clients move towards. You can hop to the next slide. In terms of how projects are financed, this is just a quick recap, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but these are the three most common pathways our clients are choosing for how they own their solar arrays. And it's worth noting that all of this cornucopia of tax credits and grants and low-cost loans and fun stuff that's now rolling out because of this massive investment at the federal level is applicable to each one of these different projects, each one of these different financing types. So either you can own it outright. Most of our new construction and significant rehab projects are owning it outright. They're building into their low-income housing tax credit LPAs that their LIHTC investor is required to buy the solar tax credit as part of the equity investment transaction. And then if you do it right with the direct ownership of solar, and you include all the operational savings for the building by lowering your common area or owner-paid electric usage, you should be able to increase your borrowing capacity So anyway, direct ownership when done right for new construction and significant rehab is definitely the best way to go, but requires getting in early and making sure you bake it into all the financial covenants and cash flow projections for the deal. A power purchase agreement is a good backup option. See a lot of clients come to us and say, you know, we've maxed out our dollar per unit that we can do on this deal, and so we don't have any additional spending power for this project, but we still need to install solar because we need it for passive house, because we need it for municipal requirements, which you're starting to see in Boston and New York City, many other places. So a no-cost power purchase agreement, you have a third-party investor come in, the building pays nothing, you get a no-cost pathway. We've spent years customizing the no-cost pathway to be workable, because the biggest problem is getting all your investor and lender consents and approvals to make this no-cost pathway work. It can be a huge hassle, but if done right, can be relatively easy. No-cost pathway, the third party monetizes all the tax credits and subsidies, and then passes that to the property in the form of a really low and subsidized electricity rate. So the property is just saving in its ongoing electricity bills relative to what it might have paid to the utility. Last option I'll say is highlighted here. We call it the internal power purchase agreement. This is for larger and more sophisticated housing developers. And as has been noted here, we've seen this model implemented by Wynn, Jonathan Rose companies. And more recently, we've been supporting a smaller nonprofit housing developer in Cambridge, Mass. Called Homeowners Rehab and implementing this. But this is where instead of working with a third party investor group to do the PPA, you just pop up your own as the housing developer. You make your own solar LLC, and then you capitalize that solar LLC with the funds needed to install the solar, and then you monetize all the tax credits and benefits. So you act as your own third-party financer. So the property, at the property level, it gets a no-cost pathway, but you still retain all of the financial value of the deal without sharing it with a third-party investor group. And that is very attractive for many larger, more sophisticated folks who have some staffing that they're able to allocate to that, which is a little bit more of a legwork. We can move onward here. So in terms of our experience to date, this is just to run us through it. We can go to the next slide in 23. So we've saved over a few $1 million on solar projects here. We applied for over 3.5 megawatts of solar for competitive applications this last fall. We got very little advance notice from the federal government when they rolled out this 30-day application window, and then had to sort of scramble with everybody to get this together. And I will say it was more of a hassle than we would have hoped, of like basically the federal government to try and avoid fraud and all the other types of concerns you might expect, has basically a huge amount of like pain in the ass verification. So if you want to log in, you have to use a unique ID and two-factor this and that, and you got to get something in the mail sometimes. And anyway, so we had a very annoying time working with clients, getting them to be able to actually just create their logins. But once that was all done, the actual submitting of the application process, we streamlined and was fairly easy to do. So we can hop to the next slide. In terms of the current status of that, of the total we submitted, we've got 3.5 megawatts approved and 1.3 megawatts still pending. So in applications that were submitted last fall, it's now May, and unfortunately, the federal government has not gotten back to all of its applications yet, because they hit, I think, a much larger volume of applications than they were anticipating, especially in a few tracks. So that's unfortunate. And in theory, the next 30-day window for 2024 is supposed to open in Q2. And you may be thinking, like me, it is already Q2 right now. So when is that 30-day window going to happen? And the answer is that we don't know, and we're expecting that's very likely going to get delayed from Q2 and probably pushed to the fall to give the DOE and Treasury more time to finish reviewing all the 23 applications. Because if you get rejected in 23, you want to know that you're rejected so you have time to then resubmit in 24 if your project is still ongoing and has that timeline flexibility, as I discussed earlier. So they need to really close out their 23 application process before they launch their 24. So we're following that closely, but that's kind of the current situation. You can hop to the next slide. In terms of categories, so category 1, worth noting, it's broken down into residential behind the meter and then category 1 other eligible project. For us, that bucket is mainly filled of like, we've got churches and schools and folks that are in low-income neighborhoods and other nonprofits that aren't behind the meter of a residential property. So category 1, as you can see, every application that we submitted for category 1 that was serving a residential property got an award this past year, which was great news. I was expecting that lane was going to be totally clogged up by single family applications. And it seems like they made the whole process hard enough that the single family financing folks just didn't really participate in a meaningful way. So it turned out that lane was left wide open for multifamily projects that are on a slightly slower moving timeline. We're able to easily get awards in that category, which I was excited to see. And then category 3 is the higher 20% award for multifamily. And as you can see, we made some good progress on there. One or two of our projects got suspended due to having expired HAP contracts at the time of submission, so they could not be verified for their affordability. We can hop to the next slide here. And this is also just highlighting which ones had additional selection criteria and which didn't. This is primarily, is it owned by a nonprofit or not? So the projects in light blue were owned by nonprofits and could access the fast lane, so had a better chance at getting it than our applicants in blue. Up to the next slide. So overall for us, we did this all in about a 2-week span of this past year. We got 83 projects approved. We have 12 still pending is our kind of current outstanding status on this. We can hop to the next slide. And then this is just to show in real life. I've taken the developer's name out of it, but just to share at a high level, a campus that I've been working on in East Boston that we applied for this adder for. We can hop forward. So this was 3 mid-rise developments and 9 townhouses. And these projects are estimated to now save the developer a few $1 million in savings with a no-cost pathway. There will be support on BERDO compliance, which is the City of Boston's greenhouse gas reduction. And this was all able to be done at no cost to the developer. Hop to the next slide. It's just a reminder of what these projects look like. This is a ballasted system on a rooftop. We can hop to the next slide. And then this just shows kind of what these savings look like. So this is in the no-cost pathway with that 10% adder. So they chose the sort of lower friction category 1 application. And so what was able to happen is by applying for the category 1, instead of having their PPA rate over on the right side be closer to 14 cents per kilowatt hour, with the category 1 10% tax credit adder, their PPA rate dropped by a penny to a penny and a half roughly. So added tens of thousands of dollars of savings to the deal by being able to monetize this higher tax credit and have the third-party investor group offer a lower rate on an ongoing basis for the solar, resulting in this multi-million-dollar savings projection. And we can move from there. I believe that is all. So I recognize that was a lot and it's fairly complicated. I think I'll just say in closing that we were overall excited to see how much progress we were able to make since this first round was a total crapshoot in terms of accessing these credits, and we had a pretty high success rate and are hopeful that whenever the 2024 round opens at some point in the next 3 to 6 months, we will be able to help developers get that in place, and then position them well with their 40 or 50 or even 60% tax credit scenarios to then go into the fall when we start looking for the free money via Solar for All grants that hopefully will help gap fund a lot of the rest of these budgets for projects. And there are some, I'd say last thing I'll say is a lot of these funding opportunities just require that you finalize things before you turn the solar system on. So in many cases, you can go forward and actually build the solar project and literally just wait to turn it on while you're figuring out this funding stuff, which is what we've had a few of our deals have to do. So there's not a need to kind of hold up the entire process while trying to access these incentives in many cases. And it remains to be seen with Solar for All and these other grants how those rules will shake out.
Awesome. Thanks, Isaac. If folks have any questions, you can come off mute, put your question in the chat. I do have one clarifying question for you, Isaac. When you say the 30-day application window, that's for that rolling basis, Treasury or DOE treats all the applications or receive them the same day, but you don't just have 30 days to apply, right?
Yeah, well, it's 30 days to have your best chance at getting it. So every year there's going to be a 30-day window where all applications are deemed equal on equal footing and as if they came in on the first day. If it's not fully subscribed in that 30-day window, you can then submit after that and applications will be reviewed on a rolling basis thereafter. However, we saw in this past year that like most of the program got fully subscribed in the first 30 days. So if you want to have a good shot at getting it in the first year, you really have, in a year you're applying, you really have to get it in the 30-day window.
Got it. And then we got a question in the chat about the process for applying for the bonus tax credit. Is it through your state housing finance agency or through DOE?
It is through DOE, so a fully dedicated portal that is on a national basis. So there's no kind of state level integration. It's just a national level application process.
When we send out the slides, I can include a link for that portal website too, if folks want to look at it. Any other questions for Joshua or Isaac or about the IRA programs? Nope. Well, once we send out the slide deck, if you have a chance, when you have a chance to look over the information, I think Isaac's email is included on his, so I'm sure folks can reach out to him with any questions. You can reach out to me or Joshua, and we're always more than happy to help talk through any questions or challenges folks run into. Awesome. Well, thank you, Isaac and Joshua.
I was going to say, it looks like there was a question on determining priority states.
For which program?
I'm guessing that might be NHT and GRID with the list of priority states for that program.
Yeah, so it was really based on where the coalition members had a pretty strong presence and familiarity with the state, with the landscape, so and relationships with affordable housing networks. So,
and in that state tracker, we list out which states are covered by which multi-state program, so you can see whether or not your state is receiving or was awarded funding through a state program like your state energy office, and then also which multi-state programs included your state in their application. Awesome. Well, there's no other questions. We can end a couple minutes early. Thank you again to Isaac and Joshua for taking the time to talk with us this afternoon, and it was great to see everyone on the call again today. Have a good rest of your day.